Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate this screen poster in Photoshop. I recently saw this screen poster and I thought it'd be a great project to do in Photoshop because I can teach you some things about gradient maps, but also how to use one of the least used blending modes in Photoshop, which is the difference blending mode. Now, if you're not familiar with that, I will give you a little 101 at the beginning of the tutorial, and then I'll show you how you can actually use it for some creative effects. So if you want to follow along, I have included all the assets that I use in a link in the description of this video. So you can go there, download those, and then let's dive into Photoshop. All right, let's first take a look at the original poster, kind of look at what we're going to recreate here. So for the most part, the whole thing is basically just red and black with some touches of white here on the face and on the knife, which gives you a real strong contrast. The one spot that instantly communicates the message is obviously the knife or the ghost face mask. So that's what's being highlighted. Beyond that, we have a lot of texture in this, and we have some texture that interacts with both the light and the dark. An example is here, or even here, where we have some splatter going both into the darks and into the light areas. And then here we have kind of an inverted skyscape or city that's knocking out the bottom of our character. So those are all the elements that we're essentially going to recreate. And to do this, I'm going to be using a blending mode that you don't hear a lot about. It's mostly used for utility in Photoshop rather than actual design, and that's the difference blending mode. So I'm going to go ahead and just close this and then go to File, Open. And in the Assets folder, I've included this Jorn Uranus image here from Unsplash, and I'm just using this to show you the basics of the difference blending mode. So let's go ahead and add a layer up here. And what I want to do is go to Edit, Fill, and I just want to fill this layer with black. So here I'm going to select black for the content and hit OK. And now we're going to have just an all black layer. Next, I'm just going to take my rectangular marquee and just make a selection kind of in the middle here. And I want to fill that with white. So I'm going to make white my foreground color here. And then I can go to Edit, Fill with Foreground Color and hit OK. All right, so I now have a layer and you can see we're basically black, white, and black. If I put this on difference, you can see right away what it's doing to the image. So the black is doing nothing, right? So black basically acts as if it were transparent. If I move this to the right or the left here, you can see that there's transparency here and black here, and this blending mode really sees no difference between black and transparent. And then in this white area, you can see that it's inverting this image. So whatever was black turns white, whatever was white turns black. And here you can see the effect that that's having over this image. As I move it around, it's basically creating this X-ray effect. So that's what the difference blending mode does. Now, typically the way I've used the difference blending mode in the past is when you're lining up two layers. So for example, I have two layers and they have the same image. But let's say I did some transforms on the one below and I want this to line up. So maybe this one, I'm going to do Command T for transform and just make this a little bit bigger. So now if I put this on difference and I start to line these up, basically I want my entire screen to turn black. Okay, so here what I would do is I would line up one spot that's relatively obvious. So maybe this spot here, kind of line up there so that that point is lined up. Then do Command T for transform. Hold down Option, which is going to place my anchor point. And I want to place my anchor point right about there. Now it's not showing, and that's because this checkbox is turned off. So I'm going to turn that on. You can now see my anchor point right here. If I zoom out and hold Option, it's going to scale from that anchor point. You can see as I line up my layers, they start to become, there starts to show less and less of the original image. And once I have it lined up perfectly, I should just have a black image like this. So that's typically how you use difference. But the basic effect that it's doing is it's turning everything white, inverting everything that's white. So let's go ahead and add another layer here. And this time I want to do just a black and white gradient. So under basics here, the last one is just a black and white gradient. I'm going to do a linear gradient and just go from the left to the right and put this on difference. And here you can see again where it's black on this side, it's doing nothing. But then here where it's white, it's inverting the image. And you get these cool effects where that transition happens, where you get this kind of old film effect where the blacks start to become lighter than their surrounding colors. Now, obviously this is an interesting visual effect, but in terms of how do we work with it, how do we turn it into a design, that's where it gets a little more complicated. Now, obviously we could do something like this. I'm going to go ahead and select this radial gradient, maybe just do it from her face. You could see that's kind of creating a cool, interesting design. But let's see how else we can work with this difference blending mode. And the first thing I want to show you is how you can add texture to an image using this. So first, I'm going to go to my grunge layers, and you'll find this one in the assets. But I'm going to take this Nucly grunge 49, and I just want to make this the size here of my canvas. And I want to make sure this has no color. When you add color to the difference, it adds a whole nother layer of complication, because not only is it inverting the luminosity, meaning the white or darkness, light or darkness, it's also inverting colors. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and do a Command U, which brings up my hue saturation, and just bring my saturation to 0, and then put this on difference. So here you can see in the black areas, it's acting very much like a screen overlay. And in the white areas, it's acting kind of like a multiply. And then you have these transition areas where it's working inside that gray, and you get those strange, weird effects. Now, just putting this on difference, you get kind of an old photo effect much more strongly or much more realistically than just putting this on screen. So you can do some interesting things with that difference. And anytime you have a dark texture that you're putting on top of an image that you generally would try using screen for, try to experiment and see what the difference does. Because it may have a more interesting result. Now, having looked at all this, what I want to do is I want to use some of these techniques in recreating our screen poster, or that screen poster look. All right, so let's go ahead and close this. I'm not going to save, and let's create a new file. Here, I want to create a file that is 2160 wide by 3840 tall, which is basically a 19 by 16, but vertical. And we're going to hit create. Next, I'm going to go to view, new guide layout, and I'm going to change the columns to 5, put the gutter to 0, and then for the rows, I'm going to change this to 10, gutter to 0. This will just give us a basic grid, so as I place things on my canvas, you have an idea of where they should go as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a folder here. Actually, before I even create a folder, I'm going to go to File, Open, and we're going to place our subject. Now for this, I obviously don't have an image of ghost-faced holding a knife, but I do have this photo of my brother, and he's standing in a very similar pose to the original poster, and he has these strong highlights on his face, which we'll use as our ghost face equivalent. So I've already made some adjustments to this. I'm going to leave those as is and just hit open. And here I want to do a rough cutout. So I'm just going to go to any of my selection tools. That'll bring up my select and mask. Click on that. And here I want to change this to cloud. Just gives you better results. And then I'm going to hit select subject. And this is using AI to make a selection. Now, I don't think this is the best way to look at it. I think the overlay viewing mode here is probably better. And that's done a really good cutout. I'm happy with that. Let's hit OK. And then here, what I want to do is I want to convert this to a smart object. That'll basically just contain it. And then I'm going to put it into this file. Yes, here. And here, what I want to do is I want to place his head kind of here and here. So within this quadrant here, I'm going to do Command T for transform, bring my anchor point up here, and then just start bringing this in to about there. Okay, and then I'm going to put him, we'll call this model, and then I'm going to put him in a folder. Now I could add a folder here and then put him in that folder. I'm going to Command Z that. Another way to do that is just to do Command G for group, and that'll put that whatever layers you have selected into a folder. Now I'm going to call this subject, and the reason I'm doing this is so that by the end of this I have a file that I can easily change aspects of in order to change the poster to, let's say, have a different subject or a different title. Okay, next I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to open this Elizabeth colon file, and this is going to be our cityscape. I'm going to pull this in here, do Command T for transform. I want to make this quite a bit smaller. And I also want to flip this horizontally, so I'm going to go flip horizontal there. And then here I want this kind of right about there, and then I want this to come down to right about where this line here is. So about there. Maybe we'll make this come down a little bit lower to about there. Okay, so first I'm going to go ahead and just turn off the guides for now. If I go here, guides, it's Command semicolon. So let's do Command semicolon. And let's start making this. First, I'm just going to extend the sky upwards because it's pretty much just a single color. I'm going to go to my gradient tool, make sure it's set on linear, and have it on foreground to transparent. Just kind of the default state I want my gradient tool in. That way I can just select the color like this and then do a small gradient that extends that sky up. Maybe another small gradient here that extends the water. And then I'm going to start working toward making this black and white. So first, before I even make it black and white, I'm going to go ahead and select the sky. So here we can just go select sky. It should do a decent job. Oh, what happened here? Select sky. There you go. Okay, so with the sky selected, I can go Command M, bring up my curve and just force that to white. And then I can invert this selection. And here I want to make this basically black. So I'll do Command M again, bring up my curve, just kind of start pushing this toward black. And then here, maybe I will, do Command D, which is deselect, Command D. And then I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Black and White. And here I can take my blues and push those more toward black, get this whole bottom area kind of turning black. And I do want a few little white highlights in there, but they should be relatively small. That'll help sell our difference effect. Okay, so something like this, and I still need to get it a little bit more black and a little bit more white. So I'm going to do one more curve on the whole thing and just bring my blacks more toward black and my white more toward whites. So something like this. Okay, so next I want to invert this. So we'll go Image, Adjustments, and Invert. And then let's go ahead and put this on Difference. And you can see it's having that desired effect where it's kind of cutting out the bottom of him. Now, because my subject is in this folder, what I can do is I can clip this effect so that it only applies to the contents of this folder. To do that, I'm going to hold down Option and click between the two. You can kind of see that effect that it's having. Now, it should not have a hard line down here. The only reason it would have that is because my white is not pure white, so it's not properly inverting it, or this underneath isn't quite the right one. So let's first just do a curve. I'm going to bring up my white so you can see that that's kind of fixing it, but we're also losing that detail. So I might just leave that. I kind of like the little detail in there, and maybe we'll just get rid of the rest of that effect. But there is one other thing I want to do, and that is add these buildings as they move away from our subject. So to do that, I'm going to make another copy of this layer, put it back on normal, but here I want to delete the sky, so all the black up here. So to do that, I'm just going to go onto my magic wand tool and just select up here, and that should select all the black. I can just hit delete and it'll leave me these nice details, and I'm going to put those on multiply so they just kind of sit on top and add a little bit of detail. And now we're getting a nice cutout effect, and the great thing about this is I can move my subject down here and he'll always remain cut out because of that difference layer. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, now that I've placed him, added my building detail, which we'll call building detail. The next thing I want to do is I want to add in some of the paint splotches around here. So to do that, I'm going to create a folder, and this folder I'm going to call splotches. And inside this folder, I'm going to start with just a solid black layer. Now, I'm going to take the whole folder, and what you can do is you can actually assign a blending mode to a folder. And all the things that you put inside that folder will inherit that blending mode. Generally, when you create a folder, the blending mode is set to pass through, which means the blending mode of the individual layers will act on the rest of the layer stack. But if you change this from pass through to one of these other blending modes, the blending mode of the folder will override whatever else is happening in that folder. So here, I'm going to put this on difference. Now, because our only layer is a black layer in here, it's having no effect. But if I add a layer on top of this and start painting with white, you're going to see that it'll have that inversion effect that we want. Okay, so next I'm going to go onto my brush tool, make sure my foreground color is white, and with this blank layer selected above the black, I'm going to right mouse click here and select one of my watercolor brushes. And here what I want is just kind of a splotchy paint. So I'm going to look just at the brush tips. I want to get rid of the strokes so I can see more of these at one time. I'm also going to get rid of the brush name. And then here, I'm going to go ahead and make these bigger. I just want to see the splotches here, and I want to look for something like this or something like this. And what this is going to do is if I paint, you'll see we're getting that inversion effect where the paint is inverting everything that it hits. So we get this nice transition from outside of where our subject is and into it. So I'm just going to add a few of these here, maybe one there, maybe one here, and then we'll go to a different brush, maybe one of these splotchy brushes, and add a little more splotches down here, and then maybe go to something like this one here, add a few more splotches down here. And then we'll do one more. I'll change the angle of this a little bit. So something like that, I think is good. And then I want to create the drip lines from the original poster. But before that, I want to put my lettering up here, which is just the Dolby logo. And that's going to be under the subject. So let's go ahead and just select our background layer and then do File, Place Embedded. And in the Assets folder, you'll see this Dolby. Just going to make this about this size. Now it's all white, so you don't see anything, but we can just go to Adjustments and Invert. That will make it black, and we'll place it right about there. Let me make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so that's about where I want that. Now I'm going to put this in a folder as well with Command G, and I'm going to call this Top Type. And I want to add a bit of effects to this. For starters, I want to just add some grunge on top of it. So I'm going to go to my grunge layers, and I'm going to grab grunge number 11, which will also be inside the assets folder. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and just put it on difference, and let's see what kind of a look. And again, I want this to only apply to this top type. So by holding down the Option and clipping it, I can make it only apply to that. Now the problem with this is it's too light. So it's almost inverting the whole thing. So I'm going to do Command M to bring up my curve. And I know I want to make it darker, so I can just start pulling it toward dark. And that's giving more of that effect that I want. Also, I want it to be kind of lighter at the top. So I'm just going to add another layer, clip that as well. And we'll call this Top Gradient. And if you look at the original screen poster, it kind of is light at the top there. So I'm going to do something like this. Let me try. Placing it under the grunge actually looks better. It inherits more of the grunge, so we'll leave it something like this. Okay, so now back to our splotches. I'm going to make another layer. We'll call this layer Paint Blobs, and maybe this one we'll call Paint Drips. And here, I'm going to go back to my brush tool with B, right mouse click, and here I want to grab this brush here, 298. I'll include these in the assets as well. Let's make sure this is on 100%. And then here with a white brush, we'll just hit one there. Maybe this one will do a little bit smaller right there. And then I'm going to right mouse click. And I have a couple of these other ones that have a bunch of drips. So maybe I'll take, let's see which one has the nicest, longest drip. Probably this one. So I'll take this one. I'm going to make another layer. And here, I kind of want these to be the drips between the buildings. But it's going to be hard to try to brush them correctly. So what I'll do is I'll just brush here and then with my lasso tool, just select the drip, do Command J, put it on its own layer. Then I can move this to wherever I want it. So I want one drip kind of coming here. Maybe another drip here. And then maybe I'll go back to my lasso, take one of these other drips. And do Command J, put that on its own layer. I'm going to go ahead and hide the big one there. And then drag this, make this smaller. And have this drip kind of coming right there. And the really nice thing about this is you get these, with difference, you get these nice interactions that really you can't achieve with any other of the blending modes. So for projects like this difference blending mode really takes on its own life. It's quite fun to play with. Something like that. And then I don't like that it's turning white in here. So on those drips, what I'm going to do, let's go ahead and make sure we have, yeah, with those selected, I'm just going to select my Dolby layer with Command on the thumbnail. That'll select the transparency of it. And then on those paint drips, I can just hit delete. And that'll get rid of the light part interfering with our Dolby. And I think that looks good. I think also on this one, maybe we just cut it out so it goes straight like that. Just so that the two drips on either side aren't identical. Maybe something like this. Okay, next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of grunge texture to the bottom of him. So I'm going to go ahead and I think we're happy with the splotches. So this is going to go on top of our subject. So above the subject, I'm going to grab this same Nucly Grunge 11. Make it about like this big. And again, clip it so that it's only applying to my subject. And because I'm going to have this as a variable file, meaning I might drop in other subjects, I want to make sure that it goes from edge to edge. That way, if I move my subject, there'll always be this grunge on him. And then I'm going to put this on difference. And I want it to be primarily black. So I'm going to do Command M and just make it quite a bit darker here. I just want some of this texture hitting him here. So probably something like this. And I don't want it hitting my buildings here. So I kind of need to cut them out of the buildings. Now I already have the transparency of the buildings cut out on this building detail layer. So if I just select the transparency of that and then invert it, or actually don't invert it, here I can hold down Option and add a mask that cuts that out of this. Now with that mask selected still, I'm also going to go into my gradient, and with a black gradient, I'm just going to go from about here down to about where the buildings are. That'll just fade it out so that it's just along the bottom here, as it is in the original screen poster. So something like that. And then finally, I want to add a bit of texture on top of the whole image before we give it that red look. So first, let's go to the top of our layer stack here. And I'm going to go to File, Place Embedded, and inside here, you're going to see this Texture Labs paper. This is from texturelabs.org. I highly suggest you check it out. Brady, who runs that, is a master at blending modes in Photoshop. And I'll actually link to his difference blending mode tutorial that inspired some of these techniques that I'm using here. Okay, so that layer I'm going to put on top, and we'll put this on multiply. I actually want this to kind of coat the whole thing, give it a bit of a poster look. And you're going to see this actually will come into play with our red coloring in a second. Okay, next we're going to go File, Place Embedded. Actually, I'm going to go to my grunges here, and I'm going to select grunge 48, which will also be in the assets folder. And this, I'm just going to cover the whole image from top to bottom and put this on difference. That'll kind of grunge it up a little bit. It's a little too much. Now with grunge, you don't want to use opacity. What you want to do is you want to use fill. And that'll make the effect lighter or less strong. So even around 20% is giving us quite a bit there of grunge across the image. Okay, so with most of the grunge across the image, the next thing I want to do is add a gradient map to create this red effect that you see on the poster. So we're going to go down here and add a gradient map. And what the gradient map does is it applies one color to all the darks and then another color to all the lights. And here you can see it's creating basically just a black and white. But what we're going to do here is the first color we're going to make our red color. And for this, I'm going to use 140107. What did I do wrong there? Okay, that should be a 1. So that's a very, very dark red color. So that'll be our beginning color. Next color we're going to add at around the 60 mark. So down here under location, you can see the 60. And here we're going to add B51E12. Nice strong red color. And then I'm going to add that same color again at around 74. And then here, I want to make this basically white with just a tiny bit of yellow in it. So FFFDEB, hit OK. And here you can see this little icon. This represents basically the center of the gradients between this color and this color. And I want to push this all the way here so that there is very little drop off between these colors, right? It almost goes immediately to this light color. Now you can see we basically have the poster looking how we want it. The only problem is there is no white here, and that's because of this Texture Labs color, right? If I turn that off, the whole image basically turns white. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take just his face and mask it out of this layer. So to do that, I'm going to go all the way down here to my subject, Command and click on there so that I have him selected. And then with my lasso tool, holding down Shift and Option, so I get the intersect up here, or you can just click on here to get the intersect. And what we're going to do here is going to just select out his head. So like this. And then with our Texture Labs paper selected, we're going to hold down Option and click on the mask. So now we can see it. Now the problem here is he's not light enough. We want this white color kind of all across his face. So we're going to go down to our model, do Command M to bring up our curve, and just start bringing our white point in until we have how much light we want on his face, which is about there. And then if we want to add a little more red to his jacket, we can do that too, but just kind of bringing up the middle of the curve here. So something like this. Okay, so something like that looks good. Next, I'm going to add the type down here. I want to do it under the gradient map. And we're just going to go here. We're going to select the font Montserrat, which is a Google font, so you can always download it if you don't have it. We'll make it extra bold. We'll make it 200 points. And I want the color of it to be white. And I want it in the center. Let's go ahead and do Command semicolon. Turn our guides on, and I want it right under this last one. And here we'll maybe write Scarlet A. And I want the A to be black, kind of similar to the Scream 6 logo. So we'll just change just that letter to black. And then I'm going to move this down so it's just under that last guide there. So something like this. And because it's under the gradient map, this white color is inheriting that kind of very light yellow. The other thing here I do want to do, however, is I want to add some grunge to this. Now, I can't add it with a multiply because then you won't see it on the black, but I can't add it with a screen because then you won't see it on the white. So this is a perfect example where difference is the perfect blending mode. So here I'm going to grab Nucly Grunge 11 again, which you will have in your assets. And I want to put this over just the Scarlet. So we'll add a little clip there and then put this on difference. Now right now the grunge layer is way too light, so it's having way too strong effect, but I'm going to do Command M to bring up my curve and again just make this quite a bit darker. So right about there. And now what it's doing is it's adding a little bit of grunge to our black letters and also a little bit of grunge to our white letters. So wherever we want that sweet spot to be. So something like that. And now if I turn off my guides, you can see we basically recreated this look. Now the beauty of this is, having done this all with smart objects, we can do some fancy things like this. So here's our model. I can go Command O for open and grab this other photo I took of my brother. I'm going to hit open here. And here I'm going to go to filter, select subject. And then we'll do Command J to put that on its own layer. And then I'm going to just pull this in here. Kind of scale this to about the same size. Even that's kind of cool. And then I'm going to turn off the old one. Now we also have to fix our mask. So to do that, what I'm going to do is just delete this mask and then do Command click on this one. Select out the head again. I already have this on intersect, so I just need to do this. And then we'll add a new mask holding down Option. And again, we can see here that we need to make him lighter, but we also see we have this splotch here that doesn't work. So I'm just going to go into my splotch layer, see if I can find the layer doing that, which is this one. And because this is a layer not attached to the black, I can always cut this out and just move this splotch to somewhere else. So something like that. And go down here and I can just go Command M, kind of bring this up until I have the right amount of white in his face there. Something like that. The other thing we can do if we want is go down to this Dolby here and maybe change that. Add a text. I'll make this one black. And maybe we say Dracula or something. Whatever we want, but you can see because this is in a folder and I applied all those effects to the folder, they're all being transferred onto this text. And we'll just move these. As well. So there you have it. That's how you recreate the screen poster in Photoshop, and also how you can get some interesting effects using the difference blending mode. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel, leave a comment, leave a like, share this video, turn on your notifications. And I also do suggest again that you check out texturelabs.org's YouTube channel. He's got some great stuff. He also has a website with a lot of free textures. Now, speaking of textures and Photoshop training, you can also check out Nucly.com, where I sell online training and Photoshop tools and assets that you can use. So check that out. Otherwise, here's some other tutorials to look at. And I'll see you next time.